Hello and welcome to Beyond Technique, brought to you by Platypod, Photofocus, and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamir Young, and I'm joined by my co-host and brand new puppy father, Skip Cohen.
Oh my God. I'm not a puppy father. I'm a puppy's father. Because somehow, I don't know whether we blame it on aging or brain cells I lost at concerts in the 70s and 80s, but we decided to get two puppies, which is hysterical to watch, but not so hysterical to clean up after. So that's what my life is like right now, and anybody that's ever had a puppy completely understands. Now just double it when you have two at the same time, both 4 months old, and both having unique personalities. So that's it on my puppy world.
So, Shamira, have you had a chance to use the new goosenecks yet?
You know, a little bit of experimentation. They are very, very cool.
Well, I'm having a ball with these. It's Platypod's newest accessory, and they are so slick. First of all, they're stackable, which is unusual. So if you need a wider range on setting up your lights, whatever you're going to put on the end of those goosenecks, you've got twice the distance you can go, or more for that matter. But what I'm using them for, I've got one set up, for example, I've got them set up on the Max with those two Lytra Torch 2.0 lights that are just remarkable. And I've got those little diffusers on them. And it just cracks me up because Lytra is now making barn doors and soft boxes, and you've got so much control over the lights. But just with the diffusers, it's enough light for me to just use anytime we're Skyping or FaceTiming and I'm trying to get some light on my face for better lighting on a video call. So I actually have it set up on a Max behind my laptop, and those two arms come around. So when I'm not using it with a camera on it, I just take the Max, drop it behind my laptop, bring the two goosenecks around with those two lights, and it's all the light I need in terms of just lighting up my face for any kind of video conference call. And
that's cool.
Yeah, it's very slick. And then you've got the advantage, too, of I'm nuts about those two for macro work, and I'm not known for my photography, but in terms of taking photographs of anything that I might want to try and do in macro, whether it's a piece of jewelry or just something fun that I'm doing, having those two goosenecks set up, I've got an instant macro set up all the time. And I know we've shared a lot of blog posts from Shiv Verma and Don Komarechka where they're doing macro work.
You know,
it's cool.
It's very cool. I mean, with Platypod, they're always putting out these new high quality, cool products. I mean, between the goosenecks and their multi-accessory kit, along with their just ever-growing product line, because they're always working on something cool, it is just something really cool to look into as far as a holiday gift for your photography friends or family members that are interested in photography. It's a lot of fun.
So what do you want to do today?
I want to talk about some amazing stuff.
Well, let's talk about amazing stuff, because when you and I relaunched Beyond Technique, the whole idea was to literally highlight topics that went, like we said, well beyond technique. And we didn't want to talk about technique in imaging or business or marketing. Well, today is a perfect example as one of my favorite people joins us, Suzette Allen. Now, for those of you that think you know her, she's best known to most of you as one of the industry's leading educators. She's also a Lumix ambassador. She's definitely, and this is her newest title I'm going to throw out here, she is the official road warrior of the photo industry, having just completed 15,000 miles of the United States in a 9-week lecture tour with both her and her husband Johnny in the car, and they are still happily married. I'm not sure there are too many of us that could say that after 9 weeks on the road. She's also the queen of hybrid with her videos and combining still images and video clips and music. But there is a completely different side we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a picture of hope. Now, some of you know it as one of Suzette's blogs, but it started with a remarkable story of hope, patience, dedication, perseverance, frustration, and focus. And I'm sure we could come up with another dozen descriptive words. So on that note, I'm going to shut up and say, Suzette, welcome to Beyond Technique.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on here and share my story. It's pretty remarkable.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
We are so grateful to have you on, Suzette, and we are so excited to hear your story and, just as importantly, learn from your story too, because it is amazing and unreal. But before we get into that, we do like to kick things off with our favorite first question. Just could you give us a brief overview of how you got started as a photographer?
Sure. Actually, I got married at 17. Yeah, I was 17. And my husband was about 21, and he loved photography. He had a little 110 camera, and the one thing he wanted for Christmas was a 35 millimeter camera. So I saved up my money, and for our first Christmas in 1982, I gave him a 35 millimeter camera. And right before Christmas, like a week before, I thought, oh, I better learn how to use this so we can use it when we open it on Christmas Eve. So my little 1 week crash course on how to use this camera totally bit me with the photo bug. And from that week forward, I absolutely love photography. And I just went after it. In fact, a week later, I got a job at a 1-hour photo lab. And so a full year, I was like immersed in photography, and it's been my lifelong passion ever since. So I started my own business when I was 20 and as a photographer, little studio, and it's seriously been my lifelong passion.
Do you know, it's almost as if the amount of time you spent getting to know that camera, by the time you gave it to him, it was more like regifting.
And then we had to share it. So, yeah, he used it a little bit, but I was the one that really got passionate about it.
Wow. Well, from that background to today, where you really are one of the most recognized educators out there, and I know for a lot of years before we started working together specifically, we knew each other from various conventions. Mm-hmm. But the journey that I started out referring to in my intro that nobody really knows about, or they know a little bit about because you've always been very open about it. But that's what we want to talk about today. You know, you're free to go into whatever details you want to go into, but let's start and set the stage after a horrific accident living in Alaska.
Yeah, 30 years ago, I was driving in a car and I hit a bull moose that was standing in the road. It was a legal bull, 6-foot antlers, and they're huge animals, like 1,500 pounds. And basically you hit them in the shins and their body comes through the windshield. So that's what happened. And basically it busted all the glass out. So I have scars on my hands, but the glass was gone. So the moose's fur hit my face, thankfully. So my face was crushed and all the bones were broken, but I have no scars, which is wonderful. And so looking at me, no one would ever know that my whole face was crushed. And they wired my jaw to keep it all together while it healed. And I've had a lot of dental work to restore my broken teeth. And fortunately, I didn't lose my sight because my orbital opening was broken a few times and between my eyes was shattered. A few surgeries and everything later. You know, I look pretty much like I used to. My teeth are actually prettier than the originals. That's all good. But what happened that I didn't know about for 2 years was the brain injury. So I suffered a traumatic brain injury. And this was 30 years ago. A lot of people didn't know about that. I mean, the medical industry was behind, and Alaska was even more behind. So nobody diagnosed me with a brain injury. And my life just spiraled downward because I was severely impaired. But I didn't know. When it's your own brain, you can't tell what's going on. I did sleep like 18 hours a day, like for a year. And I was like psycho 2-year-old emotionally. It was rough. It was really rough.
Wow.
After about 2 years, my husband's like, man, I don't know who you are. You are not the person I married, and took me home to California, dumped me off at my parents, and divorced me. And that was a really low point. And, you know, I didn't know what was going on. I was severely depressed, and I was, you know, we lost our home, our businesses, everything, lost my husband, I lost my mind. I was like a shell of a person, and I didn't understand what was wrong. And I had no idea. I was just at the lowest, hopeless point in my life. It was really horrible. But the hopeful part is my mom happened to work for an insurance company. She ran across a support group for head injuries. And she thought, I wonder if this is maybe has something to do with what happened to Susie, because I wasn't the same anymore. Anyway, so I went to the class and I bawled through the whole thing. I'm like, this is what I've been saying all along, and nobody would believe me, So I applied for the group, and I joined the group. The doctor heading it up had me tested to see if I literally did have a head injury, because it was 2 years later, 2 years of destruction. And turned out I did. And I was a good candidate for a grant from the state of California. So this grant was set out to prove to the state of California that a person with a mild head injury could be rehabilitated and put back into the workforce. So I got a grant for $40,000 worth of rehabilitation, and that changed my life. And so that started the journey of healing and recovery, and also just instilled hope. For one thing, just understanding what happened, and that there was hope that I could be okay again. So yeah, that was a rough start and 2 really rough years. I don't remember a whole lot about it, which is fine. I don't want to remember anymore. It was really bad.
Wow. So Suzette, as I'm listening, I have to say, to me, it sounds like you helped pave the way for future people who have gone through this to get treatment, effective treatment. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but you said the grant was to prove that someone could rehabilitate from such an injury?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. You were helping people, I guess, whether you knew it or not, at the time. It's just this legacy of helping people that you have. It's amazing.
It's actually amazing. And, the seatbelt fines, when you get caught not wearing a seatbelt, the money from the seatbelt fines goes towards this grant.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or at least it did 28 years ago. I don't know.
My goodness. So, I'm curious about the process of this. I think it's important that our listeners understand this isn't like someone who just fell and hit their head, and you get up and you have a headache. You had to go through a heck of a lot to get better and to even retrain your brain. Could you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah. Actually, the grant allowed me to go to the Center for Neuro Retraining in Sacramento. And so it was like going to a full-time school or a job, 8 hours a day. And I don't know how long it was. It was less than a year, but my memory was so weak then, I don't really remember. But I would go through attention process training. So my brain lost the ability to do cognitive functions. I didn't lose my motor skills. I could still do stuff with my hands, but my cognitive abilities were really confused. Like one of the things they had me do is sort a deck of cards by red cards and black cards. I would be confused. I couldn't sort between red and black. I was that impaired. And so the therapist would make me sit there and do it, and I would sit there and cry because I just couldn't do it. And they would do it over and over and over until I started being able to do it. And then once I mastered that, they would have somebody come in the room and interrupt and be a distraction. Boom, couldn't do it anymore. And so I would work past that. And then they would turn on the radio in the room. Ugh, so much for that idea. I still couldn't do it again. Then I had to practice that for a while. So the ability to screen out distractions and do multitasking and just be able to focus was something I had to relearn. Oh my gosh, it is the hardest thing you can imagine to train your brain to do stuff that you cannot do. And what's interesting, in our world, in our culture, we're taught that, okay, so you're really strong in these areas and you're not very good in these areas. So don't worry about that. Just focus on your strengths and go that way. And actually, we have far more capability than we realize. And what do we use? 10% of our brains? Some of us only 5, maybe. But
oh, I know somebody that only uses 2, but I won't say who it is right now.
Right. So really, we have so much more capability than we realize if we will persist and push into make ourselves do stuff we can't do. And that means doing it over and over and over and over and over until we develop the pathways in our brain. So one of my favorite sayings throughout this whole process is that which we persist in doing becomes easier. The nature of the task doesn't change, but our abilities increase. But it requires a lot of persistence to just push through and make yourself do stuff you literally can't do. You just feel like an idiot. But I went through months of doing these little processes, and then they would make it harder. Every time I conquered it, they would make it harder and add a distraction. In the end, I'm doing visible things, writing on paper, adding numbers in my head, listening to the radio, all these things all at one time until I could actually do everything at once. It was an amazing process, forcing your brain to, learn these things and the ability to keep it all straight. I almost feel like I not only overcame, but got stronger because of it. I know my belief got stronger. And the more successes I had, the more I realized, wow, maybe I can do this. And that grew. I mean, hope, of course, just blossomed because I didn't know if I'd ever be normal again or ever be able to hold down a job again or whatever. And as I went through this process and forced myself to do all these things, like they had me do a little aerobics class. Like I used to do aerobics all the time. I couldn't even walk on a treadmill without falling off. I had to relearn my balance and everything. And so they had me actually teach other people in the class how to do aerobics. I couldn't even follow an aerobics class at the time. So that was stressful, but it was therapeutic and it made me learn. And, it was about 8 years of just forcing myself to do stuff and pushing myself before I felt like I was 100% back. I mean, I felt like I was injured, brain damaged, damaged goods, never going to be okay for so many years. But I kept pushing myself until I felt like I was an overcomer. Last thing I did was I went back to college and I got my bachelor's in business management. I graduated in 2000. So I just proved to myself that, okay, I'm not brain damaged anymore, or Dane Bramaged as we called it, just for fun. But it's just a matter of pushing yourself and believing that you can, even though you can't. You just believe that you can, which makes you keep going until you can. And I really feel like it's changed me and changed my whole perspective on life. And it's given me such a platform for encouragement when I teach Photoshop. I mean, it's a miracle that I can do Photoshop, much less teach it. But when you take a class, you just feel like an idiot, like, oh, I'm never going to get this. Mm-hmm. But it's been such a great platform for encouragement to tell people, well, if I can do it with brain damage, you can do it. Just got to keep trying.
Hey, I'm curious as to the role through all of this and the journey, let's just call it the journey back, mm-hmm. Or the journey back to a place that was actually, I think, better. Because I look at a lot of the things you do. You are a risk taker in every which way when it comes to anything artistic. In fact, just the fact that you and Johnny did this 15,000 mile journey is a good example of, it's like, come on, I'll try anything. What role did you find photography played in your artistic spirit, nurturing that path on the way back? I don't even know if I'm asking it the right way.
Well, in the beginning, I had a photography studio. I just opened it in a mall. And of course, I didn't know I was brain damaged and I didn't know anything. I mean, so I ended up having to close it. And later on, I started doing photography with another company and started up a studio. That was really stressful. And as far as being an absentee owner, and my partnership wasn't good. So I got burned out, and I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going back to college to get my bachelor's, and I'm not going to pursue photography anymore. I just want to work for a corporation and not go there. Right. But as I went through this whole process, and, at the end of college, you got to figure out what you're going to do, that passion returned. And it's like, no, I have to go back after photography. I am going to start my business again. I am going to do what I love. And if it's that much in you, you have to go that direction. So I did. And of course, that just fuels the hope in you as well. When you're doing what you're designed to do and what's truly your passion and what you love to do, how you love to see the world, it came right back. It all came back, even though I had been burned out. And it's like, I'm not going to go there anymore.
Obviously, there was a passion. You got your degree. There was a passion to get back to the dream of your own business again. At what point did the dream of being an exceptional artist kick in and start to take over? Because you are a business owner, and that was one dream. And maybe sometimes when you and I have talked about this, I think about it's not just a story of hope, but it's also about not letting go of your dreams. And one dream was being a business owner and getting back into the world and being employed and being able to earn a living and things you've referred to in the last few minutes. But then the other part is the quest to keep experimenting and become a phenomenal artist. And I'm just curious about the role that they played in that, or have played in that whole journey.
Actually, that's a really good question. And you mentioned about being a risk taker. And I hadn't really thought about it all that much, but being a risk taker or being willing to jump out there and do something I'm not really experienced at is how I got into teaching. So I've been involved with West Coast School and California photographic workshops. I went as a model and assistant and, just helped out because I love to help people. I learned Photoshop from Don Emmerich because I was assistant in his class, and I worked at a lab, and I was assisting at California photographic workshops, and Tom Deininger was the teacher, and someone asked him about how to do a head swap, and he's like, well, Suzette, you do that all the time. You want to do a quick demo on how to do that after lunch? I'm like, sure. Okay, I can do that. It went really well. And then at the end of that class, the director of the school asked me to teach the class next year because Tom was moving out of state. Like, teach a week-long class. And all I had done was taught 1 hour. This one little demo. And I'm like, well, I got a year to prepare. What the heck? I'll say yes. So yeah, big risk, huge risk. And so I had a year to prepare. I did a couple of classes in the process. And that was 2001. And from there, I totally skyrocketed. And I've had a 19-year career of teaching, which is totally my passion. But I hadn't really thought about it being spurred by being a risk taker and being willing to believe I can do it, even though right now I can't.
As I'm listening, Suzette, this is striking me as it sounds like your superhero origin story. Have you heard of Have you heard of that? It's we see the process of a superhero becoming a superhero. Mm-hmm. And hearing about your accident and 8 long years of rehabilitation. It's funny because thinking about the movies that we watch about superheroes, maybe there'll be a 5-minute reel with some cool music in the background, and I don't know, they show a superhero training and failing, and then 5 minutes later, of course, in the movie it's supposed to be over a longer period of time, but then, literally 3 to 5 minutes they're a superhero, but that's not what real life is about. And I really want, true. Right? And I want to hammer this home because especially today, we live in an instant gratification society. And listening to your story about battling for 8 years and even finding the courage to believe that you could get better, which is for a lot of people half the battle, just believing.
Oh, yeah.
The persistence and the confidence. I kind of want to dig into confidence, because even hearing your story about how you got into teaching, I mean, that took confidence to talk in front of a class, which many people struggle with, and a lot of photographers struggle with the confidence to be great and to be themselves. And so I'm sorry if this puts you on the spot a little bit, but do you have any advice for photographers who are listening and struggling to be confident in their skills as a creator and even as a risk taker?
Yeah, actually, that is a great topic. And you can't just drum up confidence.
No.
You just have to take the risk and throw yourself under the bus and do your very best. And then it's built. It's like there's a little success, and then you do it again. And there's another little success, and then you do it again. And over time, all those little successes come together and give you confidence because you have done it. But you have to push yourself and do stuff you're not comfortable with and be willing to fail. And that's the hard part. And so that's why confidence is so elusive, because a lot of people aren't willing to throw themselves under the bus, take the big fat risk, possibly fail. But that's the only way to get success and the only way to have true confidence. And that's a really great question. A great topic. I mean, we just have to be willing to be a beginner. We have to be willing to fail. We have to be willing to risk. And it's the only path.
Right. And learn from that failure too.
Yeah.
Well, and there's another piece there. You have to be willing to persevere.
Mm-hmm.
I just did a blog post a few weeks ago, and I quoted Ross Perot and Vince Lombardi seem to get credit for the same quote that simply says, too often people quit when they're on the 1 yard line, so close to a touchdown. Mm-hmm. And then there was another quote I had out there, is that before you quit, remember what got you started. And we do live, it's Shamara's line a minute ago about it. We're in an instant fulfillment world. We've got a lot of young photographers out there, and I'm not blaming this on young photographers, because a lot of times veterans are just as bad. In fact, veterans can be worse, because their feeling is, come on, I've been a photographer for X number of years. I should be able to pick up this new technology immediately, because I know all the basics. But the reality is that so often people get frustrated, and they're saying, how come I'm not a success yet? How come I did it? I did everything. I got the right equipment. I went to the right classes. I did everything Suzette told me to do. And then they'll kick back and say, but why isn't my business growing? And I guess this is another sidebar question here, that so often we misdiagnose the definition of success. And yes, it's about revenue, and yes, it's about fame and fortune and all the other aspects. But I know from my own experience as I've gotten older, success is also about getting up in the morning with a big goofy smile on your face, because you're excited about the day ahead. And I'm curious, when you look at everything that's happened in your life, good stuff, bad stuff, how would you define success today?
Well, actually, persistence is probably a big part of it. I mean, everything takes longer than you think. And we want to be successful like right now or next year. But, sometimes it takes like 10 years to get there, or maybe a whole lifetime. And persistence is one of the keys. I don't know who said it. One of my favorite sayings is, persistence is omnipotent. So if you never give up, you will get there. So success is probably really grounded in persistence. And of course, in order to persist, you do have to believe. So maybe that's the root. I don't know. We're getting real deep here. I love it.
Well, this is good stuff, and it's not something that normally comes up when you're sitting around in the bar after a busy day at a conference. Mm-hmm. And I remember years ago doing a Skip Cohen University boot camp, And Michelle Salentano got up in front of a group of about 80 to 90 young photographers that were just pretty much, a lot of them just getting started. And she made a comment about, 20 years ago, I was right where you are, wondering how long it would be before my work didn't suck. And then she proceeded to show 6 of the worst wedding images I've ever seen. Just horrible. And that put everybody at ease, because we do live in this instant fulfillment world, and everybody thinks they have, even though your time schedule might be your own, you still think you have to have a time schedule. And sometimes you just have to wait it out.
Mm-hmm.
As we get deeper and deeper, or not so deep.
No, that's deep.
And we need to be willing to fail. Because if you're afraid of failing, not willing to fail, you're not going to attempt stuff and not going to stretch yourself.
Absolutely.
So,
what was that quote? I'm trying to remember. Was it Thomas Edison? Thomas Edison, maybe? Every time he failed, or was it Einstein? I'm super paraphrasing, but something about every time I fail, I learn what not to do, or something.
Yes, that was Edison.
I haven't failed, but I've found 10,000 things that don't work.
Yes.
Right.
We're all paraphrasing, but it's the same idea.
Oh, this is so great. So we're coming up to the end of our interview, and I didn't want to say anything because I feel like we should just chat for hours. That's what I vote for. But
Okay, so Suzette, when you look at this whole journey, what are some of the milestones that you can look back at that were pivotal in helping you grow and helping you get back to being an even better Suzette?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it was each time I took a big risk and things worked out, and that gave me the confidence for the next thing. I'm thinking back to in 99, I was asked to be the director of West Coast School. And I was really unqualified for it, but the whole board had quit, and they needed somebody to be the interim director. And I thought, okay, let's take a risk. And of course, I spent the next year on my knees asking God for, okay, help me, because I am way in over my head. And it turned out to be so successful, like the most profitable sessions in 10 years, like in spite of me. That really gave me confidence. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to risk, and I know that God is for me. He's going to help me. And the belief in that, and just, pray as if everything depends on God and work as if everything depends on you. That's a great little combination right there. And that's what I did. So that built my confidence. Then the next thing, that's when I was asked to be an instructor. It's like, okay, I think I'll just take that risk and throw myself under the bus and do this little routine again. And it was a success. Each time my confidence got better or got more. And then things just keep coming up. And of course, the stakes keep getting higher every time when I take these risks. But all of a sudden, it's like the last crazy thing I just did is the 15,000 mile, 10-week long journey across the country in our 13-foot bubble trailer. What was I thinking? It was a huge risk, and what a marvelous adventure. And I don't even know what the end of the story is because we just got back yesterday. But I have confidence that it's going to turn out to be something amazing. And it was a big risk for me. And I just feel like each time I took a big risk, super scary, it was just the process of working that out that has unfolded into a pretty amazing life. I love where I'm at right now. I'm totally in transition and going in a fresh direction with new passion and going after a new tribe and a new kind of work and more inspiration too. People have so responded to the inspirational part of my talks. I've taught 20 classes in the last 70 days. And wow, it's just really opened my eyes. And you know what? I'm ready to take another risk. And I don't know what it is yet, but I know it's going to turn into something amazing. So I guess that's my big thing, to encourage people to believe that things are going to turn out well. God's in your corner. Go forward, take the risk, and just believe for the best. And then watch out. You never know what your life is going to turn out like.
That was a perfect answer.
That's great.
Thank you.
And
it's all true.
Well, I hate being out of time, but I think we're out of time.
Unfortunately, we are. But we do want to make sure and ask Suzette, where can folks find you online and see what you're up to?
Oh, SuzetteAllen.com is my website. It's Suzette Allen on Facebook. It's Suzette Allen on Instagram. If you want to follow Bubble Trailer on Instagram. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, Suzette Says is my blog.
Excellent. We'll make sure to include those in the show notes too, those links.
Okay. You can find all of it on SuzetteAllen.com.
Perfect. And Skip, where can folks find you?
It's always the same. My names are as creative as Suzette's. It's Skip Cohen on Facebook. It's Skip Cohen on Twitter. Everything I write is Skip Cohen University. You'll also see a lot of cool things now over on Platypod.com that Bo Shamir and I are working on with the Platypod team, because we're part of that team now and very excited about it. And we always remind everybody we're interested in your input and your feedback and your ideas for future podcasts. So my email is skip@MEI and the number 500.com. And as always, my next question is, and Shamira, where do they go to find you?
Folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. So that's my first name, CHAMIRA @photofocus.com. Yes, let us know your feedback. We love getting questions, ideas, feedback. It absolutely shapes how we move forward with this show and the amazing guests that we have on. And speaking of amazing guests, Suzette, wow. Thank you. I'm kind of speechless. This has just been wonderful.
And thank you for sharing. I mean, you really are an open book in terms of helping people and using that story of hope to just inspire more people, including me. And I've heard it 2 or 3 times. I know the story, and I'm still inspired. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for letting me join you and tell my story and hopefully encourage people. I love that.
Well, you are all about inspiration, but the fact that you and Johnny just did the Road Warrior Tour of the Year, you really have become, photo industry ambassadors, and not just for all the companies that were behind you, including Bay Photo and Platypod and Lumix and Nanlite and who am I forgetting?
So many great
Flash
sponsors.
Drive, and I mean there were so many companies involved, but the fact that you touch so many people with inspiration, and I get inspired every time we're hanging out together in some direction. You. So thank you very much for being part of this today.
Thank you.
And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they have the desire to improve their photography business and bring it up to the next level. We look forward to having you with us next time on Beyond Technique, brought to you by Photofocus, Platypod, and Skip Cohen University.